Hey everybody. Oh, where's the Reddit post? That's what I was doing. Oh, I was going to read the thing. Sorry, everybody. Oh, anyways, it reminded me of the Jefferson. Anyways. Thomas Jefferson. Action into the house. Okay, so it's where are we? Honors and embarrassments of scientists, the ordeal of victory. It's another chapter. Okay, so this is the part I was going to read. The House balloted 19 times on February 11th and again after midnight. It balloted 35 times during 5 days with no change except a few indecisive ones within the state delegations. The tally always stood 8 states for Jefferson and 6 for Burr, 2 being divided and therefore not voting. This looked like the meeting of an irresistible force and an immovable object. The immovable object never did give way, but it finally crumbled at the edges sufficiently to permit passage by and over it. On the 36th ballot, the Federalists in the 2 divided states of Vermont and Maryland, I'm in Maryland now, so we can look up the history of the Maryland delegation, the congressional delegation in 1800, abstained. So on the 36th ballot, the Federalists in the 2 divided states of Vermont and Maryland, Vermont, Bernie Sanders, and Maryland, abstained, giving the vote of those to Jefferson, who thus had 10. Delaware and South Carolina also abstained, being recorded as not voting. The other 4 New England states, by supporting Burr to the bitter end, suggested that they belonged to the old guard, which preferred death to surrender. So should I end the whole stream now, or should I keep going? I'm gonna try Twitter. Okay, we're going to keep going. Perhaps Bayard was influenced by Hamilton to some extent. Oh, well, the breaking of the deadlock was directly attributable to the actions of Bayard of Delaware, Bayard, who had long said that as the sole representative of his state, he had the election in his hands, and who found himself encircled by all the doubtful votes. His entirely credible explanation was that since it was perfectly ascertained that Burr's election was impossible, he concluded that the only remaining object of supporting him was to, quote, exclude Jefferson at the expense of the Constitution. When he announced to his fellow Federalists his unwillingness to pursue such an object, he aroused prodigious clamor and received vehement reproaches. Nonetheless, after two caucuses, he might gain general acquiescence, but for one Connecticut congressman, the final action could be interpreted as meaning that, while everybody except the New Englanders had given up Burr, nobody had accepted Jefferson. His colleague, Robert Goodloe Harper, reversed Bayard's emphasis in his own report to his constituents. He charged the Republicans with an inflexible determination, quote, to risk the Constitution and the Union, unquote, rather than give Jefferson up, thus laying the blame on them and attributing to his own party the higher patriotism. Perhaps Bayard was influenced by Hamilton to some extent and got from him the idea of seeking some sort of guarantees from Jefferson. Whether he received them or not, through the agency of Samuel Smith of Maryland, though through the agency of Samuel Smith of Maryland, was afterwards a disputed question. Oh, Samuel Smith of Maryland is going to get in trouble. Afterwards, a disputed. Yeah, I read that whole bit. And there are other Smiths too. Seems sufficient to say here. It seems sufficient to say here. What seems sufficient to say here about Samuel Smith was afterwards a disputed question. It seems sufficient to say here that while Smith probably assured Bayard that Jefferson would not disturb the fiscal structure or make unreasonable removals of Federalists from office, which could have been assumed from his record and recent conversation of Conrad's, there is no evidence that he made any sort of deal. 58 is their footnotes. Jefferson believed, as his friends did, that the vast body of Federalists around the country approved the outcome of the contest, and few will now question the calm statement of the National Intelligencer that the voice of the people had prevailed. Footnote 59, February 1801. And then 58, the one after any sort of deal, says this question is admirably discussed by Borden, chapter 7. He does not credit Bayard's final actions to Hamilton's influence. And then the previous footnote, number 57, at the end of a paragraph, it says, see especially J.A. Bayard to Samuel Bayard, February 22nd, 1801, in his correspondence in AHA report from 1913, number 2, 131 to 132. So he got it from the AHA report. His correspondence for his entire period, pages 116 and 132, is an invaluable source. Harper's letters to his constituents follow in the same condition. Right. So then, for all the balloting, see Annals, number 6, Congress, 2 session, 1022 to 1030. It was reported promptly in National Intelligencer. And 55, before I started talking, something else. Okay. Perhaps Bayard was influenced by Hamilton. It was afterwards a disputed question. Oh, whether he received them or not through the agency of Samuel Smith of Maryland was afterwards a disputed question. It seems sufficient to say here that while Smith probably assured Bayard that Jefferson would not disturb the financial structure or make unreasonable removals of Federalists from office, which could have been assumed from his record and recent conversation of Conrad's, there is no evidence that he made any sort of deal. Jefferson believed, as his friends did, that the vast body of Federalists around the country approved the outcome of the contest, and few will now question the calm statement of the National Intelligencer that the voice of the people had prevailed. That's February 18th. Okay. That's February 18th, 1801 is when they said that in the Intelligence. The president-elect got words of cheer from men whose approval he valued more than that of diehards in Congress. His friend Dupont de Nemours, Nemours, addressing him as, quote, the greatest man in bracket, the greatest place in the United States, end quote, wrote him thus, quote, you never had but one vice. I compliment your country and both hemispheres that you have at last lost it. February 20th, 1810. That's from 1810. As translated in correspondence, page 30. What Dupont actually wrote was this: Vous n'avez jamais eu qu'un vice. Je fais mon compliment à votre patrie et aux deux mondes de ce qu'enfin vous l'avez perdu. So, it was 9 years later in 2 days. Or correspondence, that's when it was, okay, I think, yeah. So now do we have on the okay, so the whole thing, okay. Well, I didn't finish the thing. I'm just gonna end it.